everybody. We've got a great one today. For a change, our old friends Mark Leibovich of The Atlantic and Molly Jong-Fast of her Fast Politics with Molly Jong-Fast podcast are joining me to explore Trump's first 100 days. Everybody's been doing their own recap of the first 100 days, getting into the big issues like tariffs and the stock market and the war in Ukraine, the immigrants sent to El Salvador without due process, Signalgate, and all of Doge's destruction. And I care deeply about these issues, but I want to talk today about some of the horrible things the Trump administration has done that have been underreported. So let's give them some of the attention they deserve. I want to start by trying something new. These are rapid fire ridiculousness. And Molly, Mark, I'd love your reactions to each of these. First, the gold decor in the Oval Office. It looks like a Trump hotel there now, doesn't it?
It seems like it. I haven't seen it up close, but a number of my colleagues were there. 3 of my colleagues were there for an interview last week, and they said it's much more striking. I mean, I guess there's obviously been photographs and there's been video, but apparently it's just much more striking to see in person. And yeah, I mean, this is the Trump decor. It is very Vegas. It is, you saw hints of it in the first term. Although I will say, like the Trump hotel that was in Washington, the first term was actually fairly tastefully adorned. I mean, it was a little bit, it was grand, but it didn't have a lot of those touches. This seems to be a fuller version of the Trump aesthetic fanning out into the new administration.
It's got nice North Korea vibes.
Now, Trump has been taking has us taking a different look at our maps. The Gulf of Mexico is no longer. We now have the Gulf of America, and he hopes to annex Greenland. We missed you a couple times ago when you were stuck in Greenland, right?
I think we did. Yeah, that would have been a perfect time, but I was stuck in Greenland, and it's hard to communicate from there, and I was in the middle of something.
So he talks about annexing Greenland. Vance visited and just got to see an Air Force base there.
Yeah, it seems like it was scaled back. It seemed like they had plans for, well, first of all, Usha Vance, his wife, the second lady, went, and there was so much fanfare around her trip, they were worried that she was not going to be greeted well at all. And since she's pretty novice as a public figure, it looked like they sort of at the last minute added the vice president to this, but they also scaled back the itinerary, and it turned out to be a pretty safe toe touch kind of trip into like a military base in the north where there are no like real people around that she would have to interact with or they would have to interact with. So it was basically very in and out, and it looked like it was just intended by the end just to do no harm.
57,000 Greenlanders. That's how many are there?
In the whole country, yeah. The capital city of Nuuk and UK is like 15,000. So basically the entire country is physically the size of more than 3 Texases, but it is smaller in population than Bethesda, Maryland.
And now Trump has suggested that Canada be the 51st state.
Yeah. And well, his dealings with the former prime minister, he used to refer to Trudeau as the governor of our 51st state. But a few days ago, Mark Carney, the Liberal candidate, won in a major upset victory that was almost entirely attributed to Donald Trump's clear preference for the other guy. And Trump is calling him the prime minister now. So he hasn't used the governor of our 51st state in at least 3 or 4 days since Carney's been elected, for whatever that's worth.
Okay, now Don Jr.'s has a new social club called the Executive Branch, which will open in D.C. sometime next month. It has a $500,000 membership fee plus annual dues. Have you heard about this thing?
Yeah, Molly and I think, are trying to get our applications together, right? We're trying to get the admission fee. We need to figure out have to raise the money, but we're clearly interested, right, Molly?
And Trump has begun selling watches, Trump watches, which range from $500 to $100,000 for a Trump watch.
Talk about inflation.
Have you heard about this? Have you heard about the Trump watches?
No, I have not heard about the Trump watches, but I have heard about a lot of the other stuff, like the Trump coin.
What is the coin? Is the coin?
Well, there's a meme coin, and then there's many different iterations of ways in which Trump is trying to sort of profit off the presidency. in varying different ways that are more expansive than his first term, but still sort of shockingly low, despite being, I think, more fulsome in its corruption. They are still really shockingly low rent.
For the record, by the way, Michael Dukakis had watches for his campaign.
Really? Was one $100,000?
Well, it's interesting you ask. No, but but I was up covering, I guess, the first Clinton campaign, and there was some like secondhand thrift store around Manchester, and they had a Michael Dukakis watch there on sale for like $5 or something. I think I still have it somewhere, and I'm guessing, I don't know, what would you give me, like 100,000 for it?
It seems like a very different approach.
It does, but I'm just saying there is a historic precedent for this. I mean, granted, he was not elected president, but
yeah, he would have gone to the 100,000 once he was in the White House.
No question.
We've been hearing a lot from Musk, but everyone's favorite moment was when Trump tried to help him sell the Teslas.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah,
and that didn't work.
Nope.
It seems.
The Tesla profits are down 71%. From the earnings call last week, which if you think about it, 71% is a lot. I'm not a car dealer, but that seems like a lot.
Now, here's another thing that Musk really cares about. The White House has been assessing ways to persuade women to have more children.
You know, can I just take this one for a minute?
Please.
As someone who is a woman and has children, one of the things that is so stupid about this, if you don't cut Head Start, right, and all of the child care programs, you know, like there's so many ways in which you could incentivize women to have children. And instead they're like, we're going to give you a check for $5,000. And this is like yet another thing where Erdogan is clearly the inspiration here because he did baby bonuses. And there is no evidence that it works. It has literally not worked. The only place that it seems like it's starting to work to pay people to have children is South Korea. And that it's working, and it's still
South
not making
Korea.
Yeah, well, it's working, but it's only working because it is incentivized with tax You know, it's a real package with tax incentives and babysitting and childcare.
Right.
And the idea of just paying someone a one-time flat fee of $5,000 shows a certain lack.
Well, like there are European countries where, like Norway, where they take care of the kid basically till they're 6.
Right.
But it does speak to Elon's Wall Street Journal piece about Elon and children.
What was that piece?
It was an incredible piece in the Wall Street Journal
about
weeks
his,
ago,
yes.
where he has built a legion of children, and that number that's reported is about 14, but the Wall Street Journal postulates that the real number is probably closer to 40.
Could you imagine how rich Musk would be if he got $5,000 for each of those? Maybe he's not doing it for money. Who knows? Yeah.
Well, it's not in the United States.
Well, Cole, can I make one other point? I mean, yeah, there's a contradiction here. Have kids, but we're not going to pay for kids beyond the $5,000 lump payment. I mean, everything about these first 103 days, I mean, there is such an inherent contradiction to everything. Because you mentioned promoting Teslas on the lawn of the White House or at the White House or something.
Right.
I think this was like within days of signing an executive order, like extremely hostile to electric vehicles or something like that. I mean, like it is just like no one, I don't know. It's just like nothing is connected to anything else. It's just a bizarre kind of pattern where you get a sense that no one's thought anything through here, if that's even thought about doing.
Tariffs. Pretty good example of something that's completely not thought, we're going to onshore manufacturing. We're just not sure how.
I think the tariffs regime is probably the thing that has got him down into the 30s, right?
That's the thing that's made his people the most hysterical, I think. He's crashing the economy for no reason.
And that's really what it did. I mean, he lost people there, right? That's it.
He's losing people there. I mean, yeah. I mean, look. I mean, that's another inherent contradiction. I mean, his number one reason for being elected is to cut prices, right? This ain't doing that. Also, it's just the beginning. This is going to keep rolling as this thing starts to take effect in inflation numbers, in consumer confidence numbers, and the stock market's already taken a major hit.
How are his people not telling him you got to do something about this right now? Because he's waiting. It has a 90-day thing, right?
He has no people. His people are who? Stephen Miller? I mean, Peter Navarro? I think the closest you have to his people is Scott Bessent, who has sort of as much as possible tried to get ahead of this. But there's going to be a reckoning. I mean, the markets are still kind of pumped up with this idea that Trump doesn't really mean it. But, we're 75 days in. Peter Navarro told us we'd have 90 deals in 90 days. We do not have even one deal, right? Then China reported that Trump had called them. Trump had said China was going to call him.
Well, he said he's already talked to Xi, right?
Right. But then
he hasn't.
Said, well, who even knows, right? I mean, what are you going to trust the Chinese government? Are you going to trust Donald Trump? I mean, there's no, who is the person here who we can say is a reliable narrator?
I mean, that's true. I mean, I think trust is an issue here. But in the people pushing back theoretically could be Republicans in the House and Senate, right? Now, obviously, but I mean, real Republicans, as we all know them, do not like tariffs. Like that is sort of
Well, they don't like Trump, a lot of them.
A lot of them don't like Trump, but they can't say so. But they can say we are free market, free trader, anti-tariff. I mean, that's like a fairly safe position, but now they can't say that as easily.
I have a question about that. Okay, so you have 4 in the Senate who can, there are definitely 4, Rand Paul, Murkowski, Collins, and McConnell, who will vote against tariffs.
Correct.
Maybe you get it through the House.
You're not getting it through the House, because I don't think Johnson's going to take it to the floor.
Okay, say you can't get it through the House. But even if you could get it theoretically through the House, you don't have a majority to override a veto, so you're fucked. The only way to shut down the tariffs is this Koch brothers case that's winding its way towards the Supreme Court. The Leonard Leo Koch brothers case. And that, I think, really could take away the tariff power. I mean, the Supreme Court could take this power away from Trump, which he doesn't really have anyway.
How does he have it in the first place? Why?
He created an emergency, a fake emergency.
Yeah, there's been a few of those, on energy, on immigration, that kind of thing.
So if the Supreme Court, and by the way, this is a case that's like Leonard Leo. What is are Thomas and Alito going to be like, sorry, Leonard Leo?
Brothers. No, it's true. I mean, you do see
you in Maine.
That you'll see. Well, there is quite a bit of splintering going on here. I mean, this is what you just said is an example of it. But I mean, if you look at even Steve Bannon and
Musk,
I mean, Joe Rogan and even Alex Jones came out against these unlawful extraditions, right? Which is bizarre. I would never have expected.
Yeah, if Alex Jones is with you, boy, you've got something.
Yeah.
Here's some other odd things. They're about to eliminate 988. They want to eliminate 988, which is a number it's the suicide and crisis hotline for LGBTQ youth.
It fits.
It fits, but it has received millions of contacts since it was launched in July of 2022.
I mean, they don't want to do anything that will be good for anyone who's not them.
Every vulnerable population that's what it fits, right? Totally. I mean, on what grounds? Just it's it's a DEI thing?
It's too expensive. They're trying to save money for
how expensive is it?
People.
I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. Trump ordered the end of birthright citizenship. That's what he was one of his planks, right? Mm-hmm. And SCOTUS will be hearing this in a couple of weeks.
I think this is one he's not going to get very far with.
Well, it's actually in the Constitution, birthright citizenship.
But many things are in the Constitution, you know.
Yeah, but the Supreme, other than Alito and Thomas.
So it's a 7-2 vote, you think?
I think it's 9-0.
Yeah.
I think that crew, I could be wrong, and I'm certainly overly optimistic, but, they had a 9-0 for due process.
Mm-hmm.
This is on the Garcia.
Yeah, and that, I really do think, and I don't want to give him too much credit, I really don't, but I think there's a real sense in which the Supreme Court knows they have gone too far with Trump.
Let's dig into some stories that have stood out so far. The January 6th pardons.
There are certain things you just forget about. No, they take your breath away when you sort of like a few months later just sort of hold it up and remember it. It's stunning.
Do MAGA people really feel that those people weren't violent?
I don't know. It's so beyond defendable, or by any kind of intellectually honest or person. It's it's just one of the more extreme cases. But stuff like that's happening on a much sort of smaller scale or larger scale, whatever. Pretty regularly.
Tell me about Chris Krebs. Now he was head of cybersecurity, and he was the one who said this was the most secure election we've ever had.
Yeah.
In the 2020 election.
Yeah. And now they are, his big sin is, he basically has not said that the 2020 election was stolen. And now, basically, Trump and Pam Bondi. And so, they're investigating him. He lost a security clearance. He's losing all kinds of clearances. It's really hard for him to make a living now because, and also not to mention whatever harassment, the idea of being investigated, quote unquote, by the United States Justice Department with the full power of that whole department it's incredibly disruptive. It's like potentially life ruining. Yeah. This is, I think, one of the most egregious abuses of power among many.
The inspectors general were fired, 17 of them. That has to be, weren't they doing the job that DOJ kind of was supposed to be doing, like going after waste, fraud, and abuse?
I think that he may end up having to rehire some of them, or no, or yes. It's winding its way through the courts, that story. But yes, look, I think the top line on this is that DOJ is not working and they have not saved much money. In fact, they've had to rehire a lot of people, though Elon was able to send those very stupid 5 things you did this week emails. I just want to talk for 1 second about Elon Musk because it does strike me. Here is a person where no one has ever told him that anything he's thought up is a bad idea. So it is like the stuff, he's like wearing 2 hats at the press conference, writing these emails to people in the federal government, 5 things you did this week. It does strike me like he has no one around him who tells him the truth ever.
Trump, I guess. Basically he and Trump share that profile, right? They both they have this elevated sense of entitlement, partly because they're narcissists, but also one of them's the president, one of them's the richest guy in the world. And it is a type, right? And it just so happens that they've been sort of joined here.
Trump still seems a little less embarrassing than Elon. Like Elon really comes up with just Trump comes up with dumb stuff too, but it seems like Elon, like the stuff he does with the chainsaw, like nobody ever says like, you're going to look like an asshole if you do this.
He isn't afraid of that, evidently. How about NIH?
Again, this is another thing that's winding its way through the courts. Elon decided that indirect grants, that he should cut the indirect funding grants for medical research to 15% because he didn't like the idea that institutions were getting more money than that. This is a sort of interesting.
What does NIH do? The National Institute of Health.
Institute for Health. And they have different grants. So say you're a scientist at Harvard, you get a grant for $25 million, you get indirect funding for 15% of that grant. Well, so it used to be 80% of that grant, which means you'd get certain amount for your grant, and then a certain amount for indirect funding, which would mean you the people who work in your
Lab.
lab, your computers, your microscopes, your mice, the people who take it, the whole thing. And Elon was very mad that these indirect grants could be so much money, and he felt it wasn't fair, and he felt that they were giving money to Harvard, and Harvard was so greedy because it was so rich already. This is the richest guy in the world saying this, okay, which I think is an important.
So this is about Harvard's money being cut twice. I mean,
right. So, well, these are the medical grants, but so he capped them at 15%, which meant if you had a machine in your laboratory that cost whatever, $50 million, you could only get it if it were 15%. I mean, it's just so stupid. And what it did was it froze a lot of work and a lot of science. And then there are other grants that have been paused or unpaused. And once you start pausing grants, again, you have these scientists who are euthanizing the lab animals, ending the trials, because there's no space for just no money. Sorry, everyone.
And NIH has come up with cures for stuff, and they do the basic
patents
research for a lot of pharmaceutical companies.
Cancer drugs. And something like 80% of these doctors, these scientists have been offered grants from other countries. So we're going to lose, we're going to have the brain drain to end all brain drains. And what that's going to mean is less scientific research coming out of the United States. It's also going to mean less patents for institutions. It's going to mean less wealth created for the country from drugs. I mean, a lot of these laboratories have these scientists because they then get a piece of the patent pie. And now you're not going to have that anymore. I mean, it is just at every point, the stupidest, shortest sighted kind of stuff. And by the way, if China gets a lot of these scientists, which they will try, there's a real question there. I mean, it's just so bad.
Can I ask a question? Because you're very smart on this. Say I'm a scientist sitting in New Jersey somewhere, and I rely on a government grant through NIH. That grant dries up, and I, do a little work, and I find that the French government will just give me a grant, right, or something like that. First of all, what's wrong with that? I mean, it's obviously it's French money instead of American money, but it's still money, right? And your research presumably won't be affected at all. Does France see a benefit from being the giver of the grant, or I don't know.
I think it's different for different contracts, but I think a lot of them really, they either build the lab for the scientists in their country, or they own the patent.
Right. So the intellectual property goes overseas.
I mean, and so that's why these deals are such good deals for the institutions. I mean, think about Rockefeller University, for example. That's a university with as many patents as some small. I think it has more Nobel Prizes than, it would be like the third most Nobel Prizes if it were a country. Okay. So they benefit from the patents. And I think that once you have French, I also do think they tend to want to take the laboratory, the scientists, and the work to their country too, because there's a certain sovereignty to it.
I mean, NIH is the pharmaceutical industry exists in large part because of NIH and the research that they do.
And if you want to really go down the rabbit hole for a minute, RFK Jr. he had this thing about how he's going to want placebos in the vaccine trials, even for vaccines that are safe and effective and have been on the market for years and years and years. And he said earlier this month that in September, he's going to announce what causes autism. And anyone this is very
He doesn't
Trumpy.
Know by now?
No, in September he's going to know. But
okay. He needs a little more time, Al.
There's a real, I think there's a non-zero chance that he announces that vaccines cause autism, even though we know that's not true. I think there's going to be even greater degrading of vaccine trust in this country, and it's going to be cataclysmic. More cataclysmic.
Let's talk about FEMA. Trump wants to get rid of FEMA.
Yeah, I don't get that.
Me neither.
Currently, there are no natural disasters going on that I know about. I'm sure
there's certain tornadoes in Arkansas.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it killed some people.
Sarah Sanders is trying to get money for it.
Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
I bet she asked very nicely. Yeah. Okay.
She did, and Trump said he would, and then Trump sort of backed out of it.
I'm sure she'll make a big stink.
But I mean, the whole point of having FEMA is that they have resources. You don't want every state to have the amount of resources you need for the worst kind of disaster. You want to have each state have resources for disasters. FEMA, there's like 10 FEMA locations across the country, some in the territories, and it just doesn't make any sense whatsoever if a disaster happens that we don't have FEMA step in.
So who does he say is going to pick up the slack here? Just the states will handle it, like he said with COVID? It's like, well, there's no federal response here. It's up to the states.
This is the Project 2025 stuff, right? Like they want to get rid of NOAA, National Ocean Weather.
NOAA is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Agency.
And the thinking here is this is sort of like a libertarian fantasy, Koch brothers kind of thing. Like, why should the government give us stuff for free that we can make people pay for, right? So government shouldn't do weather. Private companies should do weather. Government shouldn't do emergency response. That should be insurers. I mean, that's sort of, I think, the thinking that gets you to a place where you decide that the government shouldn't do emergency response. What I don't think Republicans, if they've sort of thought this through on the long term, is like, why have a federal government?
Well, that's sort of where they want to be. That seems to be the logical extreme of a lot of this thinking, right?
Right. But here's the play. Okay, so say you get federalism just starts to fall apart. We see this happening in California, right, with Newsom. So Newsom now, he's like, well, maybe we shouldn't have the tariffs. Maybe we can negotiate our own tariffs. So why if you aren't getting anything from the federal government except them screwing you on trade? I mean, we're not there yet, but you could see how this would lead to that.
Sure. So I'm fascinated by the idea that they can sort of privatize the FEMA functions. It's like, oh, look, a hurricane. Let's call Allstate. It's like, ooh, I wonder what the forecast is.
So what else have been bugging you?
I have a topic that I think is underreported, to go to the theme here. It's being flicked out a little bit, but tourism. Okay. I mean, you see these stories about, empty casinos in Las Vegas or national parks.
Is this just because Canadians aren't coming, or is it because everybody's not coming?
I mean, this goes to a couple things. One, well, perhaps the U.S. economy. I mean, maybe people are just like not going to, I mean, there are these very hyper touristy places in the United States that rely extremely heavily on
like Las Vegas, like
New York, Florida, national parks, that kind of thing. And apparently, especially Vegas and national parks, they're taking a major hit and will probably do more so in the spring and summer. And I think this goes across a number of lines here. One, tariffs, but two, just the idea that Donald Trump will make America respected around the world right now. I mean, that's always been a questionable premise, but it does seem like he has turned America into kind of an economic pariah, not just as you follow it through the tariff story, but through it's a physical expression of the isolation, or what isolationism wreaks for an economy. And I just think that the ripples of that will go, very, very far. But I also think it's emblematic of where this country seems to be headed, or is now, on a geopolitical and economic sense.
Let me ask you about something you're kind of an expert on. You had a number one New York Times bestseller, Thank You for Your Servitude.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. It was about how Republican office holders kind of caved.
Yes, bend the knee, any number of, slavish devotion.
That's still the case, isn't it?
100%. I mean, much more so. I mean, you have a much more purified sort of reduction of loyalty. I mean, it's become even more cartoonish. Like, remember that cabinet meeting in the first term, which became kind of iconic because, you'd go all around the table and it'd be like very dear leadery, and it was ridiculous. That now happens seemingly every week.
Right.
And there's remember like Jim Mattis and maybe a couple others were kind of, you got the stink eye because it seemed like they were not playing along. But
Right.
no, there's just no one who's not playing along.
There's no Jim Mattis's.
No, and look, the John McCains and the Bob Corkers and so forth have been replaced by the, I don't know, Tommy Tubervilles. But yeah, I mean, it's just like the circle has just become that much more dense.
But every once in a while, you get a Rand Paul.
Yeah.
He has an ideology.
He does, but I mean, where was that ideology when, I mean, his sort of libertarian small government approach was just sort of running rampant on so many I mean, the intrusiveness of the Trump government as far as investigating people and just the size of the footprint that Donald Trump is trying to sort of visit upon the country is something any libertarian should be horrified by. So I don't know why Rand Paul is choosing tariffs as the time to sort of put his foot down. But yeah, no, Rand Paul is definitely, back to whatever purity he defined himself as having.
Maybe he just feels safe.
Maybe. I mean, maybe. Well, but that's the other thing. I mean, Trump doesn't have a lot of time on his side. I mean, pretty soon, especially if his poll numbers don't improve, the dreaded word, at least I assume in his own head, lame duck, will start becoming more and more true because, usually second-term presidents, just by virtue of them being term limited, I mean, they lose a lot of power. And that's coming for Trump, again, especially when it seems like he's going to make other Republicans vulnerable.
So do you think that Trump is going to fold on these tariffs anytime soon, or are we going to get the 90 days that are going to run out? I mean,
look, the thing is, you have the biggest trade wars with China. Were you going to do this in a way that made any sense, you would have made, connected with Mexico and Canada and said, let's be an alliance and renegotiate China, which is what a normal person would do. But instead, he's, can't get Japan, can't get South Korea, maybe can get India, maybe not, and is trying to get China. We still have these humongous China tariffs.
I mean, since he called time out, I don't think there's been a deal made with. Has there been a deal made with any country?
Not yet. But here's a question. I asked Andrew Ross Sorkin this today on Morning Joe, and I said, "Where are the 90 deals?" And he said, "There's nothing so far." But what I think we're not talking about is, and I talked to somebody about this recently for my podcast, is that the port traffic in Los Angeles and the port of Long Beach, two ports that mostly get from China, is down. It's down 60% next week and, down 80% the week after. So eventually this stuff, we will run out of the China-made stuff that's already in the States, and we will have a catastrophe, right?
Right. And this is stuff that's coming supposedly for Christmas. And
we're going to have a slow-moving kind of COVID supply chain problem. That's coming.
Because it takes a while to unspool this stuff.
Right. So unless Trump decides to change his mind, this is where we're heading in 2-3 weeks. And then what happens, which was inflationary, which happened during the pandemic and during the first Trump administration, is that it will become an inflationary thing.
It'll become a stagflation thing.
Well, eventually the question is, do we get to stagflation? And it's hard for me to see how we don't, because there's no other off-ramp.
Wait, Molly, can you, to play the moron here, what is the difference between stagflation versus inflation?
So inflation means things are more expensive. Stagflation means things are more expensive and you're in a recession. And that's what happened in the 1980s, the late 70s and early 80s. Yeah. So the problem is when you get into stagflation, you can't lower interest rates because it makes inflation worse. So that would be what you would do to get out of a recession, but you can't do that. And then you can't raise interest rates because that makes things more expensive. So you have no tools.
Volcker's tool was to keep them high. Right. And he did that during Carter, and that's why Carter had no chance in 80.
Right.
And it was a shock to the economy. It cut growth, and it was very hard to get out of. Part of what Biden world was so worried about was stagflation, which now Trump with the trade war is like almost signing the warrant for. Because if you look at those numbers yesterday,
His approval numbers is what you're
No,
talking
I'm
about.
thinking about the growth numbers. It was a negative
It was
0.5.
tiny. Yeah, it was
Right.
bad.
And part of it was because of the all the imports. But what it showed, I think, is that there's consumer anxiety, there's corporate anxiety. That means that people aren't spending money, and it means that businesses aren't expanding or buying things. And that is very likely gets you just the start of a recession. And so I think you're going to have a recession, and then you're going to have inflation, and then Trump is going to scream at the Fed to lower interest rates because he doesn't understand how this works. And then if he lowers interest rates, things get more inflationary, and then I don't know what you do.
Can I ask you? Okay, this is a little. I'm curious what you guys think of this. I mean, what is the best way for Democrats or for people who don't like the way this is going to message around what is being done to the economy, to the country, and so forth? I mean,
well, here's the thing. When you think about how low his approval ratings are, what are the Democrats' approval rating? They're lower.
As a party, yeah, 30. I saw a poll, Georgia, the Democratic Party has a 35% approval rating. Trump himself, it was 43 or something. Now, Trump, 43 in Georgia, by the way, for Trump is quite low. I mean, I think he got probably in the 50s, right, in the election in Georgia or something close to it.
But I can tell you right now why the Democratic numbers are bad. It's because of stuff like what happened yesterday, where Connolly said he's dropping out of leadership, he's not going to run again. And then all of these very old people were like, we're not giving it to AOC, we're not giving it to Jasmine Crockett, we're not giving ranking an oversight to someone who can communicate what about this one who's 77, this one who's 83. I mean, I saw a tweet from the Daily Caller. You saw this where Eleanor Holmes Morgan or whatever her name is wants to be the she wants to be ranking on oversight. She's 85.
But here's the question though, like would an anonymous old many-term Democrat chairing the rules committee. I mean, if AOC were just given the rules committee, right? I mean, what would the approval rating across the country be there, right?
Here's the thing. It's not so much a question of what she's going to do. It's a question of what she's going to be able to transmit, right? Nobody knows Jerry Connolly. When Jerry Connolly speaks, nobody gives a fuck because nobody knows who the fuck that is. Excuse my French. When AOC, she has the complaint, all of the polling complaints are like, why aren't they doing anything? Now, there's not a ton they can do, but
they can do what they're doing, which is rallies, right?
Right. But the part of that is that they're just not transmitting that they're doing stuff because nobody looks at press releases from Jerry Connolly's office do not get read on Main Street.
Right, but part of it is that they're in the minority, and Trump and Republicans in general, control the news cycle.
But again, when Trump was in the minority, he was still doing public, Trump, remember, compare the amount of media that Donald Trump is doing right now to the amount of media that Joe Biden did.
I think Joe Biden's absence was a terrible mistake on his part. I think,
I wonder what caused that.
I wonder, well, no, I mean, it's like Trump himself, one of his clear lessons is people like ubiquity in their presidents in some form, right? I mean, it's just, they want you out there. And Biden forfeited that for whatever reason, or maybe he was, kept away from that.
But you can't ever Democrats can't ever do that again.
No.
If they, that is the original sin of how we got here.
Yeah, because
that and the fact that Biden was too old, but that's a whole other thing.
One of the other big mistakes in Biden world was saying that the inflation was transitory and trying to say which it turned out to be, but people don't like it when you say that what they're upset about isn't real. Now we have Donald Trump doing exactly the same thing, which I think is a little bit interesting.
Well, the thing is that we had, 9.1% inflation. And then if you say, well, inflation's going to go down, it was 1 month, right?
Right.
And then it goes down. But if it goes down to 6 or it goes down to 5 or it goes down to 2, it's still inflation. And people thought that I thought we were going to end inflation and we're going to get, people thought prices would go down. So they thought an egg would go down to what it was before the 9.1%. And now, of course, price of eggs is...
What eggs?
The price of an egg, is $1 now. But no,
Yeah.
and that happened because of avian flu.
Yeah. But we have solved a lot of those pandemic problems by no longer testing or whatever is happening at the they've cut like things that are going to eventually go off in the third act, right? Like they've cut food safety stuff.
Right. Milk.
There's no world in which this stuff doesn't eventually bite us all in the ass.
Right. And by the way, when it happens, it'll all be Biden's fault. You see that
100%.
Trump is blaming the economy and the stock market now.
He is now. Now this was...
Yeah, it's all Biden's
At
fault.
least he knows that it's happening. That's something for Trump.
Mm-hmm.
Has Trump done anything good?
Yeah, I'm sure he has. He's rallied the Democratic base.
Yeah, that's true.
There are actually a couple things. Let's see. Well, he hasn't said this, but theoretically, there's talk that there could be higher taxes on the super rich.
Well, but he's not doing this. Is going to be
Yes,
we're making all these cuts. Doge is making all these cuts so that we can have a tax cut.
Here are a couple. Okay, so this is just right. Okay, so Steve Bannon. There are a couple things he's been saying that he's not Trump, but he has sort of gone to war on the tech billionaires, right? Bannon's big thing is to the Silicon Valley thing. He's been very outspoken about Musk. That's been true from the start.
Well, one of the things that I've been thinking about is just how low Trump can go.
Wow.
And if we have this situation where there's nothing for Christmas.
Yeah. $2 instead of what, 40? What was that thing he said yesterday?
Yeah, but those dolls are going to be more expensive. People love it when you make things more expensive. So I'm looking forward to watching this play out.
Well, that's why you can only get $2.
That's right. Two very expensive.
Yeah. So
dolls.
While you can't afford Christmas presents, at least he's made it safe for people to say Merry Christmas.
That's right. Because nobody ever said Merry Christmas when we had white
people
Christian.
Every time I wished people Merry Christmas during the Biden years, I got shot down.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really scary.
Yeah.
So we only have 1,300 days left.
Is that it?
Flying by.
Yeah.
Boy, oh boy. They pack so much into everything, haven't they?
Yes. Another thing that can be learned from Trump is the constant illusion of activity can be very powerful. You hear a lot of these focus group people say, and still there's quite a few of them that say, well, look, he's doing something. At least he's doing something. Now, that sort of goes to the executive order things he's doing, which basically amount to press releases as much. Yeah, it's
they're vibes.
Yeah, they're vibes. But his legislative record is, in so much as there is such a thing, they've done nothing. Nothing.
I like that he does executive orders targeting specific people. I feel like that is something we have not seen in previous presidents.
Yeah.
It's classy. It's elegant. I hope to see more of it.
What is it? I'm sorry.
He
what
does
people?
these executive orders where he targets specific people that really annoy him. Chris Krebs,
yeah.
Mark Elias. So clearly, what I love about this presidency, and perhaps the one good thing it's done, is it's the resentment presidency, right? My man has a lot of complaints. He is the old man, the get off my lawn guy. And he is using the government to pretty much go after people he doesn't like.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't think that's good.
No, I think it's probably bad.
Yeah, I don't think it's good.
No.
What's the most destructive thing he's done?
Airline safety stuff is
well, that's the most visible. But think of the lives that have probably already been lost because of the USAID stuff.
3 million a year. My husband's obsessed with that.
Yeah,
that's the richest man killing the poorest people in the world.
Correct.
But he's doing he's doing it for a tax cut.
There's also, there is this like angry mob out there. I mean, people are terrified, like that the government, I mean, just the psychic toll it takes to know that the government can come after you and you have no defense except for, the Constitution, which they may or may not be following, let alone, court rulings and so forth. It's a big, I think, you can't really quantify it, but the psychic toll of all this is very, very, very high. And I don't think we sort of know what it looks like and know how it will age. But, you certainly feel it around, Washington, D.C. obviously is ground zero for it. But I think people are feeling it in ways that they don't fully comprehend yet.
Well, Molly and I are up in New York, so.
Yeah, so we're good.
Out in the real America.
The real America. It's coastal. We're real Americans. Real American Jews.
Yeah.
The 10 of us. But yes, no, I think it's bad. It's not good. But
Yeah.
All right, you guys. Thank you.
Thanks,
goodbye.
Al.
Okay, everybody. Goodbye. Well, I hope you enjoyed listening. That beautiful music is by Leo Kottke, the great Leo Kottke. I want to thank Peter Ogburn for producing this podcast. We'll talk again next week.